All right. Good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Daf Chav Hey. We're starting at the Mishnah at the bottom of Chav Daled Amud Beis. This is a very hard sugya. It requires, honestly, probably 4 to 5 hours of unpacking. Of course, we only have 40 minutes, and I'll try to stay as lean as I can while still being as rich as I can at the same time. Maybe they'll double my salary for tonight. How does multiple of zero? How does that function, doctor? Pretty sure. Yeah, exactly as I think it is, right? All right. The Mishnah opens. Shor hamazik birshus hanizak. If you have a shiur that's damaging in the reshus of the nizak ketzad. So what is the case that we're dealing with when we talk about the shiur hamazik who's in the property of the reshus hanizak? So the Gemara tells us, the Mishnah tells us, Nagach, Nagaf, Nashach, Ravatz Bad. Rashi tells us these are all toldos of Keren. So in these cases of toldos of Keren, and what we're talking about here is a Keren tam, we're talking about a docile animal who was Nagach, who gored. Nagaf is pushed. Nashach is bite. Ravat is to crouch, and in all of these cases, he's breaking things, uvat, or he kicks. So, Birshus Harabim, when it comes to the Rishus Harabim, says the Gemara, Meshalim Chatinezek, like regular rules of Tam. Birshus Hanizak, when the animal is in the Rishus Hanizak, this is subject to a machlokes. Rabbi Tarfon Omer Nezek Shalim. Let's make sure to get this crystal clear. I sent out a chart on WhatsApp. Happy to hold it up here for you for those who are on Zoom. This is our little pie chart. And what it says over here is that by Shein v'regel birshus harabim, you're pater. By Shein v'regel birshus hanizak, it's nezek shalim. And our discussion is the bottom row. And in the bottom row, it says by Keren v'Shein, it teaches us that there's chati nezek and reshus harabim. Keren and Shein, when the animal's docile, is always going to be chati nezek. But when it comes to that bottom left box, that is where we have a machlokes, and this is going to be the box that we're discussing today, which is that Rabbi Tarfon holds that we increase the consequence to nezek shalim. However, the Chachamim keep the consequence the same when we're in the Rishus HaNizak. So the machlokes Rabbi Tarfon and the Chachamim is where there's a Keren Tam, Birshus HaNizak. Do we increase the punishment to nezek shalim as we see by Rabbi Tarfon, or do we keep it the same as is the sheet of the Chachamim? We'll come back to this page in a little bit. Amar lahem Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon says to the Chachamim, I don't understand your shita. All right, so now you can just kind of keep a hand on the Mishnah and keep a hand on this picture that you have there. This says the Rabbi Tarfon as follows: Uma b'makom shehakel al hashein ve'al haregel b'reshus harabim shu pater. We know that by shein and regel that in reshus harabim you're pater, and hechmer alein b'reshus hanizak l'shalim nezek shalim. And as we move across from the line of Shein v'Regel, when it's Pater and Reshus Harabim, it's Chayiv Nezek Shalim. So then Makom Shehechmer ala Keren b'Reshus Harabim l'Shalim Chati Nezek. Then when we see that Keren is Chati Nezek b'Reshus Harabim, ala Keren b'Reshus Harabim l'Shalim Chati Nezek, Eino din shenachmer la b'Reshus Hanizak l'Shalim Nezek Shalim. The Gemara gives a Kal v'Chomer, and I'm going to try and be clear about this. The Kal v'Chomer is going across. If by Shein you're Pater and Reshus Harabim and Chayiv Nezek Shalim in Reshus HaNizak, then if the starting point of Keren Tam is even higher, which is Chati Nezek, all the more so, says Rabbi Tarfon, that you should be paying Nezek Shalim. A Kal v'Chomer, a simple Kal v'Chomer. Says the Gemara, that is not so simple. Amrulo, the Chachamim say back to Rabbi Tarfon, Dayo lavo min hadin lichios kinidon. That's not correct. That in this case, when you make the Kal v'Chomer, you're going to be limited by the fundamental din that we started with. The fundamental din of Keren is that it is Chati Nezek in all places. That's what we know. Keren is that Keren Tam and Reshus Harabim is Chati Nezek. Rabbi Tarfon is basically saying that there are times where our Kal v'Chomer has limits. This is a sample of where our Kal v'Chomer has limits. And that is that where the din of Reshus Harabim was explicitly which is what we were taught, that Chati Nezek is a din deoraisa, that Keren Tam pays Chati Nezek b'Reshus Harabim, you are not able to increase that amount with a Kal v'Chomer. That's what the Chachamim say, and that leaves them, therefore, in the last box of the Keren Tam b'Reshus HaNizak, it must be Chati Nezek because Dayo lavo min hadin lios kinidon, that there's a limit to the Kal v'Chomer. So Rabbi Tarfon pivots in his Kal v'Chomer, and here's what he says: Amar lahem, Rabbi Tarfon says, no, you misunderstood my kal v'chomer. Afani lo adun keren mi keren. Even I am not making a kal v'chomer from the world of keren rishus harabim to the world of keren rishus hanizak. Rather, ani adun keren mi regel, and take out your sheets again. Really, what's happening over here is I'm making a kal v'chomer from keren to keren from regel. Uma b'makom shehakel al hashen ve'al regel b'shus harabim. Instead of going across from box number 1 to box number 2, the Kal V'chomer Rabbi Tarfon is different. He says that we're not going from if it's pater by Shane and Rishus Harabim and Chayiv Nezek Shalim and Rishus Hanizak. No, that's not how we do our Kal V'chomer. Our Kal V'chomer is done differently. If Shane and Regel is pater Rishus Harabim and Keren Tam is Chayiv Chatzi Nezek, then back to the top line. If Shane v'regel is chayiv a nezek shalim b'rishus hanizak, all the more so, you should be chayiv a nezek shalim, says Rabbi Tarfon. So it's instead of going across for the kal v'chomer, he's going up and down on this page. So say the chachamim, I don't really care which direction you make your kal v'chomer in. At the end of the day, we know that there's a fundamental aspect of this kal v'chomer that is unshakable, and that is that the din of chatzi nezek b'rishus harabim is a building block of this kal v'chomer. We know that din, and we don't think your kal v'chomer is powerful enough, and therefore, Amrulo, the chachamim said back to Rabbi Tarfon, Dayo lavo min adin lios kenidon, ma b'rishus harabim chatzi nezek, af b'rishus hanizak chatzi nezek. They reject the kal v'chomer, and in the kal v'chomer, that's what Rabbi Tarfon wanted to say, that Karen B'Shein, Birshus HaNizak, would have been Nezek Shalim. But because the Chachamim say, Da'al Lavomin Adin, Lios Kenidon, that there's a limit to the Kal V'chomer, they therefore say that just like Karen Tam Birshus HaRabim is Chatzi Nezek, the same exact thing is going to be true in regards to Karen Tam in Rishus HaNizak. This is a difficult Mishnah. It requires two things. It requires a deep knowledge of the limits of Kal V'chomer, which I don't possess, but I'm explaining to you a little bit from what I've gleaned from the Mishnah. And the second thing, and this is quite difficult, is why would it be that the Kal V'chomer format should be different for Rabbi Tarfon? Why is it that if I try to make my Kal V'chomer first going across the top, if this is true and this is true, then this must be true, as opposed to if this is true and this is true, then who cares if you go across for your Kal V'chomer up and down? Also not discussed in the Gemara, not discussed in right here on the page. So that is our Mishnah. And now we're going to dig into the dinim of Dayo. Let's remember that Dayo lavomin adin lios kenidon is a limit to a Kal V'chomer. So the Gemara says on Chav Hei Amud Aleph, about 8 lines down at the open of the Gemara, Rabbeinu Tam lesle Dayo. How can it be that Rabbeinu Tam makes this Kal V'chomer? We have a fundamental din of Dayo. What did I say? Did I not? What did I say? Tell me. Okay, I'll start over. That should be my biggest mistake tonight. I'll be the happiest person in the world. You know that tefillah we say in the beginning of your Gemaras to not be machshel people? This is one of those nights. Most nights are. This is especially true. So the Gemara opens Rabbi Tarfon, Leslahu Dayo. How can it be that Rabbi Tarfon doesn't hold of Dayo? The Dayo de Oraisahu. The din of Dayo, namely, the fact that we have a limit to a Kal V'chomer when we have something super clear in the Kal V'chomer, which is in our particular case, that Karen Tam is in Birshus Harabim when it damages is Chatzi Nezek, therefore we should apply Dayo. So how can Rabbi Tarfon not apply Dayo? It's a din de Oraisa. Where do we see Dayo from? We see Dayo from the world of Miriam. Says the Gemara as follows, the Tanya. Midin Kal V'chomer Ketzad. Where do we see the limits to Kal V'chomer? Says the Gemara based on the pasuk in the Brisa. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe ve'avia yarok yarak befanea halo tikalem shivas yamim. And that's what the pasuk says, is that if even a father were to have done something negative to the daughter, wouldn't she be embarrassed for 7 days? So what does that imply? All the more so for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who gave her the onesh of tzaras. So there's kind of like a built-in Kal V'chomer l'shchina, and therefore our bas are yom. Maybe because the pasuk is written in a little bit of a sharp way, that could you imagine had it only been a father, okay, 7 days, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'chvodu v'atzmo, gave an onesh, all the more so. Maybe we should do 14 days for the taras instead of 7. So the Gemara says we don't do that. We don't make this Kal V'chomer. Why not? Because what did the pasuk say? The pasuk said Shivas Yamim. So because we started with Shivas Yamim, namely, had it been that her father was the one who gave her a punishment, 7 days would have been significant. Because we started with that, we therefore apply the limit to the Kal V'chomer. Because we have this building block that is super clear, we therefore don't extend the Kal V'chomer because all we know is the building block, which is 7 days. So therefore, this is a kasha on Rabbi Tarfon, because we see that the din of dayo applied right here in the psukim. We see that dayo was limited by virtue of the fact that Miriam didn't have a punishment for 14 days, but rather a punishment for 7 days. So therefore, the Gemara says we see that dayo is a din deoraisa. So how in our Mishnah did Rabbi Tarfon not agree to the Chachamim? And the Gemara says because it depends. Ki lesle dayo. When does Rabbi Tarfon say that we don't apply dayo? That's hecha de mafrech kal v'chomer. The only time Rabbi Tarfon doesn't require or doesn't apply the rules of dayo, the limit on the kal v'chomer, is when he doesn't apply it when it ruins a kal v'chomer. But hecha de lo mafrech kal v'chomer is lehu dayo. But when the kal v'chomer is not ruined, then he will apply the rules of dayo. So therefore, let's look at our two cases. Our Mishnah, Rabbi Tarfon, did not apply the rules of dayo. He made a kal v'chomer and said that keren tam b'rshus hanizak is nezek shalim. But over here by Miriam, he is maskim. That over here by Miriam, that when we tried to double from 7 days to 14 days to extend Miriam's consequence based on a kal v'chomer, that if a father is 7 days, Hashem at least should be 14. There he said dayo and limits, and he agrees. So the Gemara, in an uncommon fashion, details out both sides. Says the Gemara, Hasam Shiva Deshchina Lo Ksivi. Over there, by the punishment of Miriam, it doesn't say anything about 7 days for Hashem at all. Asa kal v'chomer. There we have a regular kal v'chomer. I see our besar. The Gemara tried to posit, the Brisa tried to posit we should move to 14. Asa dayo apik shiva v'oki shiva. The Gemara says, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. We don't even have a base for your argument to do 14. You made the numbers up out of thin air. There is no mar makom for that. You're trying to make a kal v'chomer out of thin air. That's where we apply the limits of dayo. Aval hacha, and we're a third of the way down on Chav Hey Amud Aleph. Hacha in our Mishnah, by the case of keren tam, we're trying to figure out what's the din of keren tam b'rshus hanizak. So what was our starting point? Aval hacha chati nezek is ksiv. That is clear. That is a building block of the kal v'chomer. Therefore, when we try to say va'asa kal v'chomer va'aisi chati nezek acharina v'nasa nezek shalem, here when we start with chati nezek and you want to make a kal v'chomer and add in another chati nezek, says Rabbi Tarfon, we can't employ dayo. Why can't we limit the kal v'chomer? Because if you do, it ruins the kal v'chomer. What did we start with? We started with chatzi nezek. And then you say, oh, there's a kal v'chomer, so the number has to increase. When Rishus HaRabim is chatzi nezek, it has to be Rishus HaNizak that the number is more. So it says the Gemara, im darshas dayo, if you utilize dayo, so then afrech le kal v'chomer. Then the case makes no sense, says Rabbi Tarfon, because then what you'd have is that we have a kal v'chomer, but the halacha is the same in Rishus HaRabim as it is in Rishus HaNizak. That makes no sense. And therefore, he, in our Mishnah, does not employ dayo. So let's review. Rabbi Tarfon says, I agree that there's a rule for dayo, but dayo only applies where the base kal v'chomer is not ruined. But in our Mishnah, the base kal v'chomer would have been ruined. Therefore, he doesn't employ dayo. Therefore, Rabbi Tarfon and the Chachamim have a fundamental machlokes about application of dayo. And therefore, the din is in our Mishnah that when we see that chatzi nezek is the din for a keren tam b'rshus harabim, it must be that there's an increase in the onesh of the punishment b'rshus hanizak, because otherwise, says Rabbi Tarfon, dayo would have ruined our kal v'chomer, and that is not how dayo is meant to be used. So says the Gemara, v'Rabbanan, what do the rabbis do about this? Because Lamaisa, the Rabbanan can't have a scenario where a kal v'chomer doesn't take effect. If we have a kal v'chomer, it has to be utilized. You can't just ignore it. Rabbi Tarfon explained his rules. He uses dayo when it's not mafrech le kal v'chomer, like the case of Miriam. He doesn't use dayo like when we're dealing with our Mishnah. Fine. What's the sheet of the Rabbanan? The Rabbanan said, what are you talking about? We have a pasuk, Shiva Deshchina Ksivi. We have a pasuk that gives us, in the same way that our Mishnah speaks about Chatzi Nezek for Keren Tam B'Rshus Harabim, we have our base of the Kal V'chomer in the case of Miriam. The pasuk says, Tisager Shivas Yamim. Oh, so therefore Kasha is back on Rabbi Tarfon, because if that's true, then maybe we shouldn't, according to the Svara of Rabbi Tarfon, we shouldn't have applied Dayo here because it would have ruined the Kal V'chomer. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Tarfon, no. Hahuti Sager is dafka to teach us to Darshin on Dayo. That's not to tell us 7 days. That's to teach us that we have this din of Dayo, that we have limits to the world of Kal V'chomers. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan, what would you say about that? Even if you want to say, Rabbi Tarfon, the Rabbanan say, even if you want to say that the word tisager is to teach us about Dayo, that's fine, but we still have more psukim that are underutilized. And says the Gemara, Ksiv kro acharin about tisager Miriam. Rabbi Tarfon, what are you going to say about the fact that the Rabbanan just provided more psukim? And if in fact the Rabbanan provided more psukim than Rabbi Tarfon, your approach doesn't work. Because if we have these extra psukim, which can function as the base of the Kal V'chomer, so therefore you shouldn't have employed Dayo, but you have no choice because Dayo is a din d'oraisa. Rabbi Tarfon, what would you respond to this? And we're halfway down. With that we really employ Dayo under all circumstances where we can. But here, you might have thought, says the Gemara, that because Moshe is Miriam's sister, we know it's one of the shortest philos, because Moshe intervened on behalf of Miriam, listen to this, Lamdas. Perhaps when Moshe intervened in Miriam, what he was asking in Kadosh Baruch Hu was to override the rule of Dayo. Is to say the Kal V'chomer shouldn't apply because she's my sister. A little bit of protexia, right? We've got Moshe getting involved. Moshe's holding cup. He whispers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let's hold off on the Dayo for my sister. Let's hold off on the fact that, let's make sure that the Kal V'chomer is not employed. I should say the other way. Let's make sure Dayo is employed and that the Kal V'chomer, Aval Ba'alma, I might have thought, that maybe in general it's not true, Kamash Malan, that the rules of Dayo are employed where they're supposed to be employed, and they're not employed when they're not. And therefore, the Gemara seems to show that Rabbi Tarfon's shita is the real deal, and Rabbi Tarfon therefore holds that Dayo only applies, the limits to a Kal V'chomer only apply when the Kal V'chomer isn't upshlugged. If the Kal V'chomer can stand on 2 feet, then we employ Dayo. If it can't, then it won't. And therefore, we have an explanation for our answer. There's still some kashas on the Mishnah in regards to the various ways in which Rabbi Tarfon tried to learn the Kal V'chomer, but nevertheless, this is a valid approach for Rabbi Tarfon. Easy peasy. Says the Gemara a little bit more than halfway down. Amar le Rav Papa le Abaye. Wait 1 second. We found another shita. We found another case, a precedent setter where we don't utilize Dayo, but it wouldn't have ruined the Kal V'chomer. We're going to see 2 cases like this, one more difficult than the next. The Gemara just packed it into 1 day to get it over with. Right? So the Gemara says, I can show you that Rabbi Tarfon's rule doesn't apply. Rabbi Tarfon wanted to say that we use Dayo when a Kal V'chomer won't be ruined. We don't use Dayo when a Kal V'chomer will be ruined. So therefore the Gemara says, well, that's not true. The Gemara says that Rav Papa said to Abaye, I'll give you a case, to Tanya, and we'll see soon that Abaye is going to reject this, but says the Gemara as follows, what was Rav Papa's question to Abaye? Says the Gemara, the Tanya. Keri bizav, keri, to see zera, to see semen is its own impurity, and zav is a higher level of tuma, which is mitame b'maga uvemasa. By keri, it's tame b'maga. If one has physical contact with zera, so that's always going to be mitame to a certain degree. The famed Takanos Ezra, that there was a time in history when a person could not learn Torah, a person could not daven without going to the mikvah after seeing zera, and that was uprooted, as we saw in the Gemara, because it was a gzera, she'ein hatzibur yocholen la'amod ba. So the Gemara says that if you have a person who's already begeder zav, and he sees zera, he sees semen, so what's going to be the halacha there? Minayin. How do we know the din over there? Says the Gemara v'dinhu. The Gemara employs a logic. We're 2/3 of the way down on Chaf Hamid Aleph. Ma tahor b'tahor, just like we know that if a person's tahor and the liquid that's tahor comes out of that person, everybody's tahor. So let's use urine as an example. You don't become tummy from urine. You're a pure person. Your urine's pure also. And tame b'tame. But if a person is tame, then anything that exits his body will be tame. Okay. So then if you have tame b'tahor, if you have keri from a person who's otherwise pure, eino din sheyehe tame b'tame, all the more so, kal v'chomer Kal v'chomer, that if we see that a zav has keri, we're going to elevate the impurity of the keri to the impurity level of zav, which is to be metame b'maga uv'masa. Keri on its own, if a person is a healthy person, they're not a zav, and they see keri, so they're tamei. They got to take off their clothes, wash them. They should go to the mikvah or have tisha kabin shalmayim poured on them, whatever the case may be. Fine. But if you're already a zav, and then while you're a zav, you see keri, so then your tuma status should have been elevated to maga and masa. And says the Gemara, "V'kamaisila bein lamaga bein lamasa." We elevate the tuma of zera, the tuma of keri when the person's a zav, that keri occurrence is now b'maga uv'masa, is that even if it's moved, it's going to be metame, the person who moves it. Says the Gemara, ve'amai, why would this be? Nema ahani kal v'chomer lamaga. Maybe we should say, I understand the kal v'chomer for maga, that makes sense, but ahani dayo la'afuke masa. But maybe we should employ dayo, which we don't do, but why don't we? Why don't we employ dayo to limit the kal v'chomer back to what it was? Just like we know the basic din by keri is that a person who is a bal keri is metame b'maga and not b'masa. Why don't we say that's true even in a case of keri b'zav? And if you want to say, I don't need a kal v'chomer in regards to keri being tamei b'maga, de lo gara migavra tahor, because even a person who's a tahor who touches keri is going to be metame b'maga. Itzrich, we still need the kal v'chomer. Because Salka Daita Chamina, I might have thought that Mikra Laila ksiv, that we're only talking about Mikra Laila when a person sees keri when he's not a zav. Misha kerio gorimlo. Only when a person's tuma is caused by only keri as opposed to zav. Yatsa zeh she'ein kerio gorimlo. Ma she'ein kain, our case of keri b'zav, the keri isn't what made this person tamei. What made this person tamei is the fact that he is a zav. Ella, says the Gemara, davar achar garam, what made him tamei was the fact that he's a zav. Kamash malan, that we still need the kal v'chomer, and therefore the Gemara shows us a case scenario where we could have used dayo and we didn't, and this breaks the rule of Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon said, and seemingly the Chachamim really did agree, that dayo only applies in cases where it's not going to ruin the kal v'chomer. So over here we should have used dayo because the dayo wouldn't have ruined the kal v'chomer. So Abaye responds to Rav Papa, you have made an egregious error in your analysis of this sugya. When we said the phrase mikra laila, that we said we needed the kal v'chomer still because maybe mikra laila only applies to a gavra tahor. Maybe it doesn't apply to a person who saw keri when he was only tahor. Maybe that pasuk excludes a case of keri b'zav, and we said therefore we need the kal v'chomer. Why? Midi v'lo davar acher ksiv. When the pasuk says mikra laila, are you trying to tell me that it's saying that it doesn't apply everywhere? Why would we assume, without knowing otherwise, that when the pasuk says mikra laila, it's meant to exclude a case of keri b'zav? Keri is keri. Why wouldn't we assume that it's metame b'maga even in a case of keri b'zav? So therefore, the Gemara concludes you're taka right. This is a kasha on the Gemara. Why does Rabbi Tarfon not hold like this? Says the Gemara as a little bit of a side sugya, 9-10 lines from the bottom of the page on Chav Hamad Aleph. Uman Tana, who is the author who holds to Shamas Leida Amar Shichva Zera Shel Zav Metame B'Masa? Who says that we have a case scenario where a zav who is tamei, a zav who is a keri who is a zav, that the shechva zera shel zav, that if a zav who's already ill and tamei with the disorder of zav, that if he sees shechva zera, that the shechva zera is metame b'magu v'masa. The brisa that we saw is not like anyone. Lo Rebbe Lazar, v'lo Rebbe Yoshua. Why not? This should be Titania, because it's not a Mishnah, it's a brisa. Titania, the Tanakama, who we will soon see as Rabbi Eliezer holds, shechva zera shel zav metame is metame b'maga ve'ein metame b'masa divi Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar is of the opinion that even if a person is in the status of zav and he sees keri, the din of the keri while he's a zav is only metabe b'maga with physical contact. It's not metabe b'maga b'masa where you pick it up. That's Rabbi Eliezer. What does Rabbi Yoshua hold? Rabbi Yoshua holds, he says, Omer af metame b'masa. He says, taka, when a zav sees keri, he is tame b'maga uv'masa on the keri, but not if it's only keri. The reason over here why Rabbi Yoshua says that one is going to be metame b'maga uvemasa for carry when a person is a zav is lepisha efshar below tzachzuche ziva, is because when a person is a zav and he has a seminal emission, there's no way that there's zero zav liquid. We know from other Gemaras that we've seen before in Shas that Zera has its own consistency and profile, and Zav has its own consistency. They don't look the same. They're not the same exact material discharge. They're not the same. So the Gemara says that according to Rabbi Yoshua, when a person is a zav and he sees keri, by definition, halachic assumption that when there's keri, there's a shtickle ziva, there's a little bit of tzichzuche ziva, of a discharge of ziva. And the Gemara is medayik from this, for 3 lines from the bottom. Ad kan. Lo ka'amar Rabbi Yoshua hasam ela she'efshar b'lo tzichzuche ziva. Why did Rabbi Yoshua say that when there's keri b'zav, that we need it to be that he's metame b'magu v'mas? Because we have a halachic assumption that the keri comes along with tzichzuche ziva. Halav hachi, but had it been, even within Rabbi Yoshua's world, had it been that he did taka see keri with no tzichzuche ziva, if the keri came alone and there was no mixture at all of ziva discharge, then it would not be metame b'masa. So therefore, we don't have a tana of our Mishnah. Because our brisa, I should say, our brisa that we just learned 5-6 lines from the bottom of the page, that shechva zera is metame b'mago v'masa. There we have no shitas. Rabbi Lazar says it's only metame b'maga. Rabbi Yoshua says it's metame b'mago v'masa because there's no such thing as shechva zera below tzichzuche ziva. But had it been that it was purely shechva zera, you're right that it would have only been metame b'maga. So who is the author of our brisa? Says the Gemara, last line of Chaf Hei Amud Aleph, Elahai Tanahu, it's the following Tana, Ditznat. Lamala Mehen, this is a little out of context. Rashi gives the context 4 or 5 lines from the bottom of the page. Dibra Mascha, Lamala Mehen, Mishlosha Avos Hatumos Hasheretz V'Shechva Zera B'Tamei Meis. There are 3 things that are still important that we need to know about as we turn to the top of Chaf Hei Amud Beis, and that is Zovo Shel Zav, that the discharge of the Zov, is itself a very high level of tuma. And this, as you can see on the top of the page in Rashi, on the inner margin there, Rashi says, V'kulhu hanach mefarish b'maseches dam hanida. We will learn this in 2027 when we are finishing Shas. Don't forget today. And the Gemara says that these 3 levels of tuma, zovo shel zav, the discharge of the zav has a very high level of tuma, viroko, and the spittle, the spit of a person who is a zav, and as well v'shechvas zera, and as well umeme ragla. All of these things are very high level. V'dam hanida mitamin, and dam nida, they're mitamin bein b'maga uvein b'masa. So the Gemara says we found what we're looking for. We were looking for a Mari Makom that says that Shechva Zera is going to be Mitame B'maga Uvamasa. It wasn't Rabbi Lazar or Rabbi Yoshua, but it is the author of the Mishnah from Maseches Kelim. This is what we're talking about. The Mishnah of Lamala Mehen that we started with is from Maseches Kelim. And the Gemara says, well, how do you know that? Perhaps when this brisa, on the very top line of Chaf Hei Amud Beis, perhaps when our brisa says v'shechvas zaro, the Gemara says on the 3rd line, v'dilma hachanami lefi she'efshar b'lo tzichzuche ziva. Mehecha tesi, that this shechvas zera is without a mixture of a discharge of ziva. Maybe it's no different than what Rabbi Yoshua said on the bottom of Chaf Hei Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, that can't be. Im Kain, had that been the case, we would have learned it in the brisa of Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yoshua. Listen, Gabe Zova, we would have learned it over there by discharges. Why are we including it over here? Look at the line on the top of the page. Zovo shel zav, v'roko v'shichvas zaro. We see that shechva zera is put with spit, with saliva. We therefore see clearly that by virtue of the fact that the shechva zera was taught over here by the world of rok, of saliva, and not by the brisa on the bottom, the brisa that we saw on the bottom of Chaf Hei Amud Aleph, it therefore means that we're specifically talking about the shechva zera of a zav, below tichsuche ziva, with no mixture of the discharge of shechva zera with the discharge of a zav, and therefore we have our shita that shechva zera, when the person is a zav, is metame b'maga u ve'masa. Good. Now, I had mentioned that we have two case scenarios where we don't apply dayo where we should have. Here's the second one. The Gemara says on Chav Hei Amud Beis, on the fifth line, and we're going to be going until the fourth till the end of the page, the last of the short lines, ending with the word mishiva. So it says the Gemara 5 lines down from the top. Here's another scenario that break Rabbi Tarfon's rules. Rabbi Tarfon was of the opinion that we employ the rules of dayo, provided that it doesn't ruin the kal v'chomer. Yet here we're going to see an example where we should have and could have used dayo, but we didn't, even though the kal v'chomer wouldn't have been broken. Says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Achami difti le Ravina. V'ha haitana lo darish dayo. We have a case scenario over here where a brisa from Maseches Shabbos, Baruch Hashem, Maseches Shabbos is easier to learn. Ve'afal gad lo mafrich kal v'chomer. Even though the kal v'chomer wouldn't have been ruined, we still don't use dayo, which again breaks Rabbi Tarfon's rules. What's the case? Ditanya. Mapat, you have a reed mat, b'meis minayin. How do we know that a reed mat is subject to the tumas meis? Vidin, who the Gemara says, it's a logic, it's a kal v'chomer. Uma pachin ketanim, just like small vessels, shetahorim bezav, mitame b'meis, that are going to be considered tahor from a zav, but will be considered tame from a meis. Mapat, this reed mat, shemitame bezav, eino din sheyitame b'meis. Pashut, it's a regular kal v'chomer. So it says the Gemara, what do we see over here? The kamaisi law, bein letumas erev, bein letumas shiva. This applies even to the more strict level of tumas shiva. So the Gemara says, ve'amai. Why would you say that? Typically speaking, the mapats would have had a tuma of tumas erev. Yet when we are applying it to the rules of tumas meis, we give it the punishment, we give it the tuma of Shiva, of 7 days, which is the Tuma of the Tumas Meis. But why would we do that? We should have employed Dayo and limited the Kal V'chomer. We should have said, Ema ahani Kal V'chomer letumas erev. I could understand a little bit if you want to say that the Mapat is going to be Tameh Tumas erev, it'll just be Tameh until the sun sets. Got it, that makes sense. But maybe we should have said, Ve'ahani Dayo le'afuke Tuma de Shiva, Tumas Shiva. But perhaps we should have used the limiting rule of Dayo to teach us that when the Mapats does become Tameh Meis, it's only going to be Tameh Meis le'erev and not le'shiva. That would have made more sense. Omar Le, says the Gemara, this question was already posed. Kvar Ramane Hale Rav Nechumi bar Zechariah le'abaye. This question as to why Dayo wasn't applied and employed over here by the Bryce of the Mapats of the reeds, why it wasn't employed, they asked this question to Abaye, and a quarter of the way down, Omar Le Abaye, you've misunderstood that Brysa. Tana, the Mishnah is talking about mimapats b'sheretz ma'isila. That Brysa was talking about a mapats coming from the world of sheretz. V'hachi ka'amar, mapats b'sheretz minayin. How do we know that a mapats, that a reed mat will become tame from a sheretz? And what the Brysa said was v'dinhu, it's logical. Third of the way down, umapachin ketanim shetahorim bezav mitamin b'sheretz. And just like by small kalim, which are tahor with a zav, but are tame with a sheretz, and we're learning from sheretz instead of zav. Therefore, mapats shetame bezav. If in fact the mapats, the reed mat is going to be tame with a zav, eino den sheyehei tame b'sheretz. All the more so, it should be tame b'sheretz, and therefore this brisa is not a kasha and dayo at all, because we're not talking about tame meis at all. Ella, says the Gemara, we are going to have an issue with a mapats, but not from this brisa. Ela mapats, what are we talking about? Mapats b'meis minayin. If it's not this brisa that we thought was the Mari Makom, but Abaye turned our minds around to show us that this brisa is not talking about, the brisa was not talking about tumas meis. We still need to learn the din. So it says the Gemara, Ela mapats b'meis minayin. From where do we know that a mapats is going to be tamei meis? So says the Gemara, a different kal v'chomer. Ne'emar beged ve'or b'sheretz. We have the language of beged ve'or, of clothing and leather in regards to the world of sheretz. Ne'emar beged ve'or b'meis. We also have these words in regards to meis. And here is the kal v'chomer that teaches us that a mapats, that a reed mat will become tamei tumas meis. Says the Gemara, just about halfway down, ma beged ve'or ha'amur b'sheretz mapats tamei bo. Just like we have by the world of sheretz, we have the beged ve'or, which teaches us that a reed mat will become tamei. Af beged ve'or ha'amur b'meis mapats tamebo. So too we have the language of beged ve'or by the world of tumas meis, which extends the din from the world of sheretz over to the world of Tumas Meis, and therefore we have our issue. The kasha of Dio has fallen away. And the Gemara for the last sugya of the day deals with the quality of the Kal V'chomer. Numerous times over Shas so far in the last few years, we've learned about the different types of Kal V'chomers. When we learn about a Kal V'chomer, the highest level of a Kal V'chomer, where each phrase is what's called mufne. So we have Beged Ve'or from the world of Sheretz, and we have Beged Ve'or from the world of Tumas Meis. If each word, Beged Ve'or over here by Sheretz and by, if they're not used for anything other than the Kal V'chomer, they're considered to be Mufne Mishnei Tzadin. Both words are fully available to make a proper Kal V'chomer. When that happens, that Kal V'chomer is rock solid. It has a Magen Mashuach on it. You cannot pierce it. It's a beautiful, perfect Kal V'chomer. However, if you have a Kal V'chomer that's only mufne mitzad echad, if you have a Kal V'chomer that's only one of the terms is available in full, but the other is not, then if I can find the difference between them, I can ruin the Kal V'chomer. So the Gemara here recommends halfway down that it has to be that this Kal V'chomer is mufne. The Kal V'chomer that teaches us that a mapat is tamei meis from the world of Sheretz to the world of Tumas Meis, it has to be mufne, says the Gemara. Di'ilo mufne, because if it isn't mufne, then I can puncture a hole in this Kal V'chomer. How so? Because ika lemifrach, there's a huge difference between the world of Sheretz and the world of Tumas Meis, one that we've also seen before in Shas. Ma l'Sheretz shekein mitame b'che'adasha, that when it comes to the world of Sheretz, we have a very unique din, a chidush dekadin, that Tuma exists even b'che'adasha, even a tiny amount of flesh, of bone, I should say, from the sheretz, that will be metame. Ma'she'en kein tomar b'mei she'en metame b'chadash ela b'kezayis. So the Gemara is positing that the what's that?
Huh? So you're saying a tamei meis could be a bigger amount than sheretz?
That's the din. It's a chiddush by sheretz, that a sheretz is metame even by a smaller amount. So if we're learning mapats from sheretz, and sheretz only becomes tamei b'che'adasha, and if it's only mufne mitzad echad, if only some of the phrases that we're using are available for a Kal V'chomer, then I'll argue we cannot learn one from the other because the volume that generates tuma is different for a sheretz, only b'che'adasha, ma'she'en kin b'kezayis, which is larger. So the Gemara says, you're right, lai, it's absolutely true. Afnuye mufne. You're absolutely right that the phrases in this Kal V'chomer, the Beged Ve'or by Sheretz and the Beged Ve'or by Meis, both of them are mufne. And the Gemara goes into full color detail as to how we know this is true. Michti, let's analyze. Sheretz iskas l'shechva zera. We know that Sheretz is compared to Shechva Zera. Tichsiv o ish asher teitzei v'gomer, v'samechle o ish asher yiga b'chol Sheretz. Because of the juxtaposition of the psukim by Shechva Zera and Sheretz, we see that there's a link between them. Uchsiv b'Shechva Zera, we have language by Shechva Zera that says v'chol beged v'chol or asher yelav Shechva Zera. Beged v'or dekasav rachmana b'Sheretz lamali. If we already have a juxtaposition between Shechva Zera and the world of Sheretz, then why by the world of Sheretz do I have the extra words of Beged Ve'or, Shma Min Ala Afnuye? I therefore see that the words of Beged Ve'or by the world of Sheretz are in fact Afnuye. Ve'akati, that only teaches us one side. Perhaps we should argue, Ve'akati mufne mitzad echadhu. Perhaps we should say that really, that's only by Sheretz that the words Beged Ve'or are available for the Kal V'chomer. But perhaps Beged Ve'or are not available. Maybe they're being used for the Kal V'chomer, but it's not really an ideal Kal V'chomer. Perhaps Beged Ve'or by the world of Meis is really not perfectly available. Says the Gemara, well, Hanicha, that's only a good argument. Laman da'amar mufne mitzad echad l'meidin ve'ein meshivin. Shapir. If it were to be that the words of Beged Ve'or by Kal V'chomer were not extra and were only mufne mitzad echad, that still works according to the sheet of Lameidin ve'ein meshivin, that we make the Kal V'chomer, Lameidin we can learn, but ve'ein meshivin we're not allowed to ask questions. Ella says, and then Shapir, Ella says the Gemara 3/4 of the way down. Ella lamanda amar Lameidin meshivin. But according to the Shita that holds that when we have a Kal V'chomer that's mufne only mitzad echad, that we're allowed to be lemeidin, but we're also meshivin, that if I can find the difference between the two worlds, I can puncture the Kal V'chomer. According to that, then maybe we should say that there's a big fat problem over here and there's no kal v'chomer at all. Says the Gemara, don't worry. The meis nami afnuye mufne. Don't worry, the words beged ve'or by mace are also perfectly available. How so? Because the Gemara says, Michti, let's analyze. Mace iskash l'shichva zera. Mace is also compared to the world of shichva zera. Dichsiv anogeh b'chol tamei nefesh o asher o ish asher teitze mimenu. That pasuk is talking about shichva zera. Uchsiv bei b'shichva zera. And then it says as well, I should say a little bit better. Let me read again. Dichsiv. How do we know that shichva zera is compared to mace? Vanogeh b'chol tamei nefesh. That's talking about a mace. There we see that shichva zera is included. So here we see that because of the juxtaposition of shichva zera to the world of mace, we see that shichva zera is learned. We have the words beged ve'or. So then, why do we have the words beged ve'or in the world of mace? Shma mina, says the Gemara, le'afnuye. It must be that it's available. The have mufna mishnei tzad in full color. The Gemara now explains that our kal v'chomer that teaches us that a mapatz, that a reed mat is tamei mace is a kal v'chomer. We have on the one side by sheretz the phrase of beged ve'or, which is perfectly unused and fully available for a kal v'chomer. And then as well on the side of mace, we have the words beged ve'or that are perfectly unused and perfectly available for a kal v'chomer. Therefore, we have a kal v'chomer that's mufna mishnei tzadim. And therefore, when we say that there's a mapas that's tamei mace, we know that it's a slam dunk kal v'chomer. And even though there's a difference between sheretz and tumas mace, that a sheretz is mitame with a tiny amount b'che adasha, and mace is only mitame b'che zayis, it doesn't matter that there's a difference anymore. Because when we have a kal v'chomer that's mufna mishnei tzadin, then no questions can be asked. The kal v'chomer is rock solid. Last but not least, and extremely complicated, the Gemara says, Hanicha, all of this is beautiful. Laman da'amaru says, Don mina ve'oki be'asra. Says the Gemara, this all makes sense when we have a kal v'chomer by mace, and that the mapatz is only tamei tumas mace for one night. Perhaps we should say that I can bring some things over the bridge, but not everything. Meaning, yes, it's tamei mace, but maybe it's only tamei mace like a sheretz, which is only for a night. But according to the Shita who says that we have to bring everything over, then perhaps it's going to be that it's only tamei mace for a night. Amar Rava, Amar Kra, no. That when we're talking about a dead body, the pasuk says, "V'chibastem bigdechem b'yom hashvi." With all cases of death, we don't mess around. What do we assume? Kol tumos she'atem metamin b'meis. In any case where we have tumas mace, and in this case we're talking about a mapatz that we learned that it is tamei mace from the world of sheretz over to the world of mace, using the language of beged ve'or by sheretz and beged ve'or by mace. In such a case, lo yuhu pchusin mishiva. There's no such scenario where we're dealing with tumas mace, where we say that the tuma only lasts one night. It always lasts 7 nights. We're going to stop right here. We'll pick up tomorrow 4 lines from the bottom, last of the short lines with the word v'tehei, wishing you all a beautiful night.